Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. We're full. Rules are rules. Those words might have cost a life that night. The old man's hand clutched his chest tighter, his breath forming desperate clouds in the December air. No one noticed the dark figure watching from the charity gala exit, the man whose face had launched 1,000 memes about kindness. The homeless shelter stood like a fortress of last resort against the bitter night. Inside, bodies pressed together for warmth, while outside, Harold Wilson, 73, swayed on unsteady feet. The security guard blocked the entrance with practiced indifference, clipboard raised like a shield. Behind him, the shelter administrator barely looked up from her desk, too exhausted to care. "Please," Harold whispered, "just a corner. I think I'm—" His words dissolved into a wheezing cough. The guard stepped forward, hand raised to push him back. That's when a voice cut through the night air, quiet but carrying the unmistakable weight of certainty. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Keanu Reeves stepped from the shadows, his presence transforming the moment. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. Harold's eyes, clouded with pain, didn't recognize the actor approaching. To him, it was just another silhouette in a night growing increasingly blurred. The security guard, however, straightened immediately, the clipboard lowering a fraction. The administrator looked up, fatigue momentarily forgotten. Keanu had spent the evening at a fundraiser for local charities, one of those events where wealthy people convinced each other they cared while sipping champagne. He'd slipped out early, uncomfortable with the practiced smiles, when he'd witnessed the old man's rejection. Something about the curve of Harold's shoulders, the dignified way he tried to stand straight despite his pain, struck a chord in Keanu's heart. The security guard found his voice first. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we have strict protocols. We're at capacity and—" Keanu raised his hand gently, not in command but in quiet request. He moved beside Harold, close enough to catch him should he fall, yet respectful of the old man's dignity. "I understand protocols," he said, his voice low and measured, "but this man needs medical attention." The guard glanced uneasily at the administrator, who had risen from her desk and approached the door. Someone in the growing line of onlookers had recognized Keanu, and whispers rippled through the crowd. Phones appeared, their camera lenses catching the unfolding drama. Harold swayed dangerously, his breathing increasingly labored. "We aren't a medical facility," the administrator said, her voice softening slightly when faced with Keanu's calm presence. "We can call an ambulance, but—" "How long?" Keanu interrupted, one arm now supporting Harold's weight. "How long until they arrive in this part of town, on a night like this?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortable in its truth. No one answered because they all knew. Too long. Harold's knees buckled then, his weathered hand clutching at his chest more desperately. Without hesitation, Keanu caught him, bearing his weight with surprising strength. The cameras captured everything. The Hollywood star cradling a homeless man, the security guard's conflicted expression, the administrator's slow realization that rules were about to be broken. What they couldn't capture was the whisper from Harold's lips, meant only for Keanu. "Don't want to die outside. Please, not in the cold. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching." "Call an ambulance," Keanu commanded, not with celebrity entitlement but with quiet authority. Then, without waiting for permission, He began moving Harold toward the shelter entrance. The security guard hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. Inside, the shelter's harsh fluorescent lights revealed what the darkness had hidden: Harold's ashen face, blue-tinged lips, and terrified eyes. The packed common room fell silent as Keanu guided the old man to a chair. Some recognized the actor immediately. Others simply registered the presence of someone who moved with purpose, who acted while others watched. "He needs space, water, and a blanket," Keanu said, his hand on Harold's pulse. A young volunteer rushed forward with a threadbare blanket, while another brought a paper cup of water. The administrator followed them in, phone pressed to her ear, arguing with emergency services about response times. The crowd of homeless individuals formed a respectful circle, their own hardships momentarily forgotten as they witnessed a man in crisis and, remarkably, a celebrity who hadn't turned away. 30 minutes minimum, the administrator announced, hanging up in frustration. "They're swamped with calls tonight." Keanu looked up, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled out his own phone. "What's the nearest hospital?" "Memorial, but..." He was already dialing. "This is Keanu Reeves. I need a car at the downtown community shelter immediately." He listened briefly. "Yes, that Keanu Reeves. It's a medical emergency." The security guard fidgeted with his clipboard, protocol battling with the unfolding reality. "Sir, we can't just..." "Can't what?" A shelter resident spoke up, a middle-aged woman with weary eyes. "Can't help someone dying? Is that the rule?" Others murmured in agreement, the atmosphere shifting as the invisible became visible. How systems designed to help often did the opposite. Outside, phones continued recording, the story spreading across platforms in real time. Inside, Harold's breathing grew more labored, each intake a visible struggle against failing biology. Keanu knelt before Harold, ignoring the growing spectacle. "Stay with me," he urged softly. "My friend is coming. Fast car." He managed a small smile. "Faster than an ambulance." Harold's eyes fixed on Keanu's, perhaps truly seeing him for the first time. "Why?" he whispered. "Why help?" The question silenced the room. Even the administrator paused in her frantic reorganizing of beds to listen. Keanu didn't look up, didn't play to the gathering crowd or the phones recording his every move. He simply held the old man's gaze and spoke as if they were alone. "Because someone once helped me when I was invisible," he said. "And because being human isn't something that happens in speeches or fundraisers. It happens right here, right now." A commotion at the door announced the arrival of Keanu's driver, a tall man in a dark coat who assessed the situation with professional calm. As Keanu prepared to help Harold up, the old man's body suddenly went rigid. His eyes widened in pain and fear, one hand clutching desperately at Keanu's jacket. "He's crashing!" someone shouted. "He needs a hospital now." This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk. Without hesitation, Keanu lifted Harold into his arms. The security guard rushed to hold the door as the actor carried the frail man outside toward the waiting car. The crowd parted, phones recording the surreal scene. John Wick cradling a homeless senior like precious cargo. The driver had already opened the back door, and with careful movements, Keanu settled Harold inside. "I'm coming with him," he announced, sliding in beside the old man. "We should wait for proper medical," the administrator began, but her words faded as Keanu fixed her with a steady gaze. "Every minute matters," he said simply. "You can follow us to Memorial if you want." The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the stunned shelter staff and residents in its wake. Inside the vehicle, Harold's breathing grew shallower. The driver navigated through traffic with precision, using shortcuts unknown to GPS systems. Keanu held Harold's hand, monitoring his pulse and speaking in low, reassuring tones about nothing and everything. Movies he'd made, motorcycles he'd loved, the time he'd once been homeless himself. "Stay with me, Harold," Keanu urged as the old man's eyelids fluttered. "Tell me about yourself. Where are you from?" Harold's voice came as a whisper, each word a victory against failing strength. "Kansas, originally. Was a teacher. Before what? Before life happened." Harold's grip tightened momentarily on Keanu's hand. "My wife died. Then the house. Then the job. Dominoes." The hospital emerged ahead, its emergency entrance a beacon of harsh light. The driver pulled directly to the ambulance bay, ignoring the security guard who approached with protests ready. Keanu was already out of the car, once again lifting Harold with careful strength. "This man is having a heart attack," he announced to the startled ER staff who recognized him immediately. The surreal quality of the moment, a Hollywood star carrying a homeless man into their ER, created a brief pause before professionalism took over. A gurney appeared, nurses converged, a doctor began barking orders. Harold was whisked away, leaving Keanu standing alone in the harsh hospital lights. Administrative staff approached with clipboards and questions. Who would be financially responsible? Did he have the patient's information? Insurance details? Keanu's answers came without hesitation. He would cover all costs. Harold Wilson was his friend. Insurance wasn't a concern. Hours passed in the sterile waiting room. The shelter administrator arrived, then left when her presence was needed elsewhere. Keanu remained, declining offers of private rooms or special treatment. He sat with other worried families, his celebrity momentarily irrelevant in the democracy of hospital waiting rooms. Near dawn, a doctor emerged, searching the room until her eyes found Keanu. He stood immediately, reading her expression with an actor's trained perception. "He's stabilized," she said. "We've inserted a stent. If he'd arrived even 20 minutes later..." She let the sentence hang unfinished. "Can I see him?" Keanu asked. The doctor hesitated, protocol warring with the unique situation. "He's asking for you," she admitted finally. 5 minutes only. He needs rest. It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Harold lay small and fragile against the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting him to beeping monitors. His eyes opened when Keanu entered, recognition and something like wonder crossing his weathered face. "You stayed," he whispered. Keanu pulled a chair close, sitting with the same unassuming presence he'd maintained throughout the night. "Of course. But you're..." Harold struggled to find the words. "Just a person," Keanu finished for him. "Like you." Outside the hospital, the story had already exploded across social media. Video clips of Keanu carrying Harold, of his confrontation with the shelter staff, circulated with millions of views. News vans gathered in the parking lot, hungry for the follow-up to the viral moment. But in the quiet hospital room, none of that existed. "What happens now?" Harold asked, his voice stronger than it had been all night. Keanu leaned forward slightly. "You focus on getting better, and when you're ready to leave, we'll figure out the next steps. Together." "I can't pay you back," Harold said, a lifetime of pride evident in his strained voice. "Not asking you to." Keanu's smile was gentle. "But maybe someday, when you see someone else who needs help, you'll remember tonight." The nurse appeared at the doorway, tapping her watch. 5 minutes had passed. Keanu stood, placing something on the bedside table, a business card with a handwritten number. "My assistant's direct line," he explained. "When they release you, call." No matter what time. As Keanu left the hospital, he was met by a wall of cameras and shouted questions. How did he know the homeless man? Was this a publicity stunt? Did he often visit shelters? Keanu paused, considering the forest of microphones. The story they wanted was clear. Celebrity savior, heartwarming holiday tale. But that narrative missed the point entirely. "His name is Harold Wilson," Keanu said simply. "He was a teacher from Kansas. Tonight, he was invisible to a system designed to help him until he wasn't. That's the story worth telling." 3 months later, Harold stood at the entrance of a newly renovated shelter wing, one funded anonymously but named, at the donor's insistence, the Harold Wilson Emergency Care Unit. Harold no longer lived on the streets. A modest apartment and part-time work as a shelter counselor had restored some of what life had taken. Somewhere across town, Keanu Reeves rode his motorcycle through traffic, unrecognized behind his helmet. The viral moment had faded from public consciousness, replaced by newer celebrities and their causes. But in shelters across the city, policies had changed. The Keanu Rule, they called it informally. No one seeking help would be turned away due to capacity issues, especially in medical emergencies. Sometimes real change doesn't need a hashtag or a movement. Sometimes it just needs one person who refuses to look away when everyone else does. Wow, what a story! If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.